Welcome to our deep dive into Stephen Covey's The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. We're going to unpack his key principles and, most importantly, explore how they can apply to your life. Now, this book dives deep into personal and interpersonal effectiveness. And one thing that really struck me early on was Covey's analogy of slapping a Band-Aid on a deep wound. When it comes to relationships, we often try to fix surface behaviors without addressing the underlying issues. He calls this the personality ethic versus the character ethic. What are your initial thoughts on this?
That's a really insightful observation. Covey's distinction between the personality ethic and the character ethic is crucial. He argues that focusing solely on outward techniques without building a solid foundation of character is like building a house on sand. It might look good on the surface, but it won't stand the test of time.
So true effectiveness, according to Covey, begins with inner principles and character, not just outward behavior.
Exactly. And one of the most powerful ways Covey illustrates this is through the concept of paradigms, which he describes as mental maps that shape how we see the world. He uses this great analogy of trying to navigate Chicago with a map of Detroit. No matter how hard you try, using the wrong map will lead you to dead ends and frustration.
That makes total sense. We've all experienced that feeling of being lost, even when we think we're following the right directions. Now, think about a time when you had the wrong map. Maybe not literally, but metaphorically, in a relationship at work, or even in your own personal development. How did having the wrong map impact your efforts?
Often we don't even realize we're using the wrong map. We keep pushing harder, trying different techniques. But the underlying assumptions and beliefs that are shaping our actions remain unexamined. It's like trying to solve a problem using the wrong formula.
So identifying and shifting those deep-seated paradigms becomes crucial for achieving true effectiveness.
Absolutely. Covey stresses the importance of self-awareness as the first step. It's about recognizing those limiting beliefs and challenging the assumptions that might be holding us back. He uses this compelling story about struggling to help his son improve at baseball. Initially, he focused on changing his son's technique.
Right.
Keep your eye on the ball, swing harder. But nothing seemed to work.
And that's something so many of us can relate to. Whether it's with our kids or partners or even ourselves, we try to force change without addressing the underlying beliefs that are shaping our perceptions.
What Covey eventually realized was that he and his wife held this underlying belief, that their son wasn't inherently good at baseball. And that belief, though unspoken, was being communicated to their son, undermining his confidence no matter how much they tried to encourage him on the surface.
That's such a powerful example of how our paradigms, those deep-seated beliefs, can actually sabotage our efforts even when our intentions are good.
It's a reminder that lasting change has to come from the inside out. We can't simply impose techniques or strategies on ourselves or others without addressing the underlying beliefs that are driving our behavior. Think of it like this. Our character is the foundation, the bedrock on which everything else is built.
So how did Covey turn things around with his son? Did he just suddenly decide to believe his son was good at baseball?
He focused on shifting his own perception. Instead of trying to fix his son, he started looking for his son's strengths and acknowledging his efforts. This shift in his own beliefs, his own paradigm, eventually created a more supportive environment where his son could actually thrive.
So it's not just about positive thinking, it's about genuinely changing our perceptions.
Yeah.
And that requires honesty and a willingness to examine our own biases.
Right, and Covey emphasizes that building character is not about shortcuts or quick fixes. He quotes Emerson, who said, "What you are shouts so loudly in my ears that I cannot hear what you say." Our true character, our integrity, speaks volumes regardless of our words.
That's such a powerful quote. It really highlights the importance of aligning our actions with our values. Covey then goes on to explain the maturity continuum, which outlines the progression from dependence to independence and ultimately interdependence.
Exactly. It starts with dependence, which is where we all begin life, relying on others for survival. Then as we grow, we strive for independence, becoming self-reliant, capable of making our own choices and taking care of ourselves.
And that's often seen as the ultimate goal, right? Being independent and self-sufficient.
But Covey suggests that independence is not the final destination. In fact, he argues that mistaking independence for the ultimate goal can actually be a trap, limiting our potential for growth and true fulfillment.
Okay, so where does interdependence fit into this continuum?
Interdependence is about recognizing that while we are capable individuals, we can achieve far greater things by working together, leveraging each other's strengths and collaborating towards a common goal. It's about moving beyond the limitations of I to the power of we.
So it's not about sacrificing our independence. It's about choosing to collaborate and create something greater than we could achieve alone. And this brings us to the first habit: be proactive.
This is where Covey introduces one of his most empowering concepts, the idea of being responsible for our own lives. It's about moving beyond just reacting to circumstances, and instead focusing on what we can control, our own choices, our actions, and our attitudes.
He talks about the circles of concern and influence. Could you elaborate on that for our listener?
Absolutely. Imagine two circles. The outer circle represents our circle of concern, everything we worry about, from global events to personal relationships. The inner circle represents our circle of influence, the things we can actually do something about.
So proactive people focus their energy on their circle of influence, right?
Yeah, exactly. Instead of getting bogged down by things outside their control, they focus on taking action within their sphere of influence. Covey shares this compelling story of a proactive executive who quietly gained influence within his organization. Even though he wasn't in a position of authority, he focused on achieving results and building trust, expanding his circle of influence through his competence and integrity.
That's a great example. It shows that proactivity isn't about being aggressive or controlling. It's about making strategic choices and taking effective action within the realm of what we can actually influence. I also love Covey's distinction between haves and bees.
Yes, he points out that the haves keep us stuck in our circle of concern. If only I had a different job, more money, a more supportive partner. The bees, on the other hand, empower us to focus on our circle of influence. I can be more patient, more understanding, more courageous.
It's a shift in focus from external circumstances to internal character. And that's a powerful idea that can really transform our approach to life.
He even suggests a 30-day experiment. For 1 month, try focusing solely on your circle of influence. Make small commitments and keep them. Be a model, not a critic. It's a great way to start putting the principle of proactivity into practice.
This experiment is something our listener could try right away. It doesn't require any special resources or knowledge, just a commitment to shifting our focus and attention. And now that we've explored habit 1, be proactive, let's move on to habit 2, begin with the end in mind.
This habit is all about the power of vision. Covey introduces the principle of 2 creations, mental and physical. Everything is created twice, first in our minds and then in the physical world.
He uses the analogy of building a house, which I think is really helpful.
Imagine trying to build a house without a blueprint. You'd end up with costly mistakes, delays, and a structure that doesn't meet your needs.
It would be a disaster. Now think about a project you're working on or a goal you're striving for. Have you taken the time to create that mental blueprint to envision the desired outcome clearly? What might you gain by doing so?
Covey emphasizes the importance of having a clear vision before we start taking action. He points out that many of us are living out scripts handed to us by others. Parents, society, even our past experiences. We're reacting to circumstances rather than consciously creating our own lives.
Habit 2 is about becoming our own first creator.
It's about defining what matters most to us, and then aligning our actions with those values and goals.
Covey suggests writing a personal mission statement as a way to clarify our values and define our desired direction in life.
A mission statement is not just a document that sits on a shelf. It's a living guide that helps us make choices and stay focused on what's truly important.
It's about proactively shaping our future rather than simply reacting to the present.
Covey reminds us that we can't always control what happens to us, but we can control how we respond.
And our responses, guided by our mission statement, determine the course of our lives.
He also suggests using visualization and affirmations to reinforce our desired outcomes.
So if you were to capture the essence of your personal mission statement in a single empowering sentence, what would it be? Keep that affirmation in mind as you navigate the week ahead.
Remember, creating a mission statement is an ongoing process. As we grow and evolve, our values and priorities may shift, and our mission statement can evolve with us.
We've now explored the first 2 habits. Be proactive and begin with the end in mind. These habits focus on personal leadership, taking ownership of our choices and defining our desired direction in life. Now let's move on to habit 3. Put first things first. This is where we get into the nitty-gritty of effective self-management, right?
Absolutely. Habit 3 is about taking the vision and values we've defined in Habit 2 and translating them into daily action. It's about prioritizing our tasks and activities based on what's truly important, not just what's urgent.
Covey introduces the 4 quadrants of time management. It's a powerful framework for understanding how we spend our time and making conscious choices about our priorities.
Picture a square divided into 4 quadrants. Quadrant 1 is for tasks that are both urgent and important, true crises that demand immediate attention.
Quadrant 2 is for tasks that are important but not urgent. Things like planning, prevention, relationship building, and personal development. This is where Covey wants us to spend most of our time.
Exactly. Quadrant 3 is for tasks that are urgent but not important, like unnecessary meetings and interruptions.
And quadrant 4 is for activities that are neither urgent nor important. These are the time wasters and distractions.
Covey's point is that most of us spend far too much time in quadrants 1 and 3, reacting to urgency and neglecting those important but not urgent activities in quadrant 2.
And that leads to stress, burnout, and a feeling of being constantly behind. So habit 3 is about shifting our focus to quadrant 2.
It's about investing time in activities that contribute to our long-term goals, values, and relationships.
Covey shares a great example of a group of shopping center managers who were struggling to improve their lease revenues.
They were so focused on putting out fires and day-to-day tasks that they were neglecting their relationships with the tenants.
But they made a conscious decision to prioritize those relationships, spending more time connecting with tenants and understanding their needs.
And the results were amazing. Lease revenues quadrupled, and the shopping center managers became valued partners, not just overseers.
That illustrates the power of quadrant 2 activities. Prioritizing relationships and long-term results over short-term tasks can lead to remarkable outcomes.
Habit 3 isn't about squeezing more into our day. It's about aligning our actions with our values and focusing on what truly matters.
And it requires saying no to things that don't align with our priorities, which can be a challenge for many of us.
It's essential. Covey encourages us to schedule time for quadrant 2 activities, just as we would schedule any other important appointment.
That's a great tip. Treat those quadrant 2 activities like the VIPs of your schedule. Now remember the story of Covey's son who meticulously scheduled his day, even allocating a specific time slot to break up with his girlfriend.
He quickly learned that efficiency doesn't always apply to human relationships.
Exactly. Habit 3 is about finding that balance between efficiency and effectiveness, between achieving results and nurturing those important connections.
And it's about recognizing that sometimes higher values may require us to adjust our schedules.
So as we move into the habits of public victory, let's take a moment to reflect. What are some of the big rocks in your quadrant 2? What are the important but not urgent activities you tend to neglect? And what's one small step you can take this week to create more space for those activities in your schedule?
Remember, small, consistent steps can lead to significant, lasting change.
Stay tuned, because in our next segment, we'll dive into the heart of effective interdependence. With Habit 4, Think Win-Win. This habit explores the foundation for building strong, mutually beneficial relationships, which is key to achieving public victory.
Welcome back. We're now diving into the habits of public victory, starting with Habit 4, Think Win-Win. This habit really gets to the core of collaboration and creating mutually beneficial outcomes.
You know, win-win sounds amazing in theory, but the real world can be pretty competitive. How do we actually put this principle into practice, especially when we're dealing with people who might be stuck in that I win, you lose mentality?
That's a great question, and it highlights why this habit is so challenging, yet so rewarding. Covey emphasizes that win-win is more than just a negotiation tactic. It's an entire philosophy of human interaction. He outlines 6 paradigms of human interaction, ranging from win-win to lose-lose and everything in between.
Okay, let's break those down. I think most people are familiar with win-lose. It's that classic competitive approach where one person's success comes at the expense of someone else.
Exactly. And unfortunately, many of us are conditioned to think this way from a young age. Think back to school, being graded on a curve, competing for spots on the team, striving to be the best. It can create a sense that there's only so much success to go around.
It's like that racehorse analogy Covey describes. A bunch of managers are pitted against each other and only one gets the prize. Everyone else loses. It's a system that really reinforces that win-lose thinking.
It is. And even if we're not in a literal competition, we might unconsciously operate from this paradigm in our everyday interactions.
So how about lose-win? Is that just the opposite, letting others win at our own expense, like being a pushover?
It can manifest that way. Lose-win can show up as people-pleasing, where we constantly prioritize others' needs over our own, often to avoid conflict, to seek approval. And then you have the flip side, lose-lose.
Which sounds pretty awful all around. Is that just a downward spiral of negativity?
Often, yes. Lose-lose stems from bitterness and resentment. It's that if I'm going down, you're coming down with me mentality. Definitely not a recipe for healthy relationships.
And then you've got win, where a person is only concerned with their own outcome regardless of the impact on others.
Right. That's basically selfishness in action. It lacks any consideration for others. Finally, there's win-win or no deal, which Covey suggests as a powerful alternative, especially in specific situations.
So what does no deal mean in this context? Is it just walking away from the situation?
It can be, but it's more nuanced than that. It means recognizing that if you can't reach a mutually beneficial agreement, it's okay to agree to disagree. This can actually preserve the relationship and avoids a forced compromise where both parties might end up feeling resentful.
So it's about knowing when to walk away, but also about the maturity to maintain the relationship even if you have differences of opinion.
Exactly. So how do we shift from these less effective paradigms to a genuine win-win mindset?
Well, that's the million-dollar question. Is there a step-by-step guide, a magic formula?
I wish it were that simple. Covey emphasizes that it starts with character. He identifies 3 key traits essential for win-win: integrity, maturity, and an abundance mentality.
Okay, let's unpack those one by one. How does integrity contribute to a win-win approach?
Integrity is about aligning our actions with our values. It's about being honest with ourselves and others, keeping our commitments, and acting in accordance with our principles.
So without integrity, our words become empty promises. We can't expect others to trust us if we don't walk the talk.
Precisely.
Mhm.
And then there's maturity, which Covey defines as the balance between courage and consideration.
So he's not talking about age here.
No, it's about emotional maturity. It's having the courage to express our own feelings and convictions while also being considerate of others' perspectives.
It's that sweet spot between being assertive and being empathetic.
Right. That balance is essential for creating a safe space for open and honest communication, which is really the foundation for win-win.
Okay, and what about the abundance mentality? How does that tie into the win-win philosophy?
The abundance mentality is that belief that there's enough for everyone. It's the opposite of the scarcity mentality, which sees life as a zero-sum game.
With a scarcity mentality, it's like if someone else gets a bigger slice of the pie, it means there's less for you. It can lead to jealousy, competition, and a fear of sharing resources.
The abundance mentality, on the other hand, recognizes that opportunities and successes aren't finite. One person's success doesn't diminish the possibilities for others.
So it's a more generous and expansive worldview, one that allows for collaboration and mutual benefit.
Exactly. And when we believe there's enough to go around, we approach negotiations and collaborations with a spirit of cooperation. It fosters a sense of shared success.
Okay, so we've established the importance of character, integrity, maturity, and the abundance mentality. But how do we actually put this into practice? Especially when, let's be honest, we're bound to encounter people who seem stuck in that win-lose mindset.
You're right, it's not always easy.
Yeah.
Covey emphasizes the importance of relationships. Even when dealing with someone who seems very competitive, we can focus on building the emotional bank account.
That's a great point. It's about making deposits of courtesy, respect, and empathy, even if the other person isn't reciprocating at first.
Right. It builds trust and creates an environment where win-win becomes possible. And remember, no deal is always an option. If we can't reach a mutually beneficial agreement, it's okay to walk away.
So it's about being assertive in our commitment to win-win, but also knowing our limits and being willing to walk away if necessary.
Exactly. And Covey stresses the importance of clear agreements. Win-win agreements define expectations, responsibilities, and consequences, making sure everyone is on the same page.
And these agreements, he argues, should focus on results rather than methods, right?
Yes, it's about giving people the freedom to use their own creativity and talents to achieve the desired outcome, rather than micromanaging how they do it.
That makes sense. It empowers people and allows for more innovative solutions. He even uses the example of a company president who wanted his managers to work together, but unknowingly created a system that rewarded competition.
He was preaching teamwork, but his reward system was set up so that only one manager could win the bonus. It inadvertently created a cutthroat environment.
It's a classic example of how systems can undermine even the best intentions. The president wanted cooperation, but was intentionally rewarding the opposite.
Exactly. Covey suggests restructuring the system to reward collaboration and making sure individual goals are aligned with team goals. This ensures everyone is working towards a shared purpose.
So it's really about aligning systems and structures with our desired outcomes, which makes me think of how important personal leadership as defined in Habits 1 and 2 is for achieving win-win. We need to be clear about our own values and goals before we can collaborate effectively.
Absolutely. Habit 4, Think Win-Win, provides a powerful framework for creating mutually beneficial outcomes in all our interactions, moving from scarcity to abundance, from competition to cooperation.
It's about recognizing that our success doesn't have to come at the expense of others. Now, building on this foundation of win-win, let's explore Habit 5. Seek first to understand, then to be understood.
This habit is all about the power of empathic listening. It's about shifting from our natural tendency to want to be heard and understood, to a genuine desire to first understand the other person's perspective.
It's so easy to get caught up in our own thoughts and agendas. We often listen with the intent to reply rather than with the intent to truly understand.
Covey emphasizes that this type of listening leads to miscommunication, frustration, and broken relationships. He tells a story about a friend who asked for advice on communicating with his wife. Covey observed their interaction and realized the husband was completely missing the point.
What was he doing wrong?
He was so focused on offering solutions and making his own points that he failed to truly grasp his wife's feelings and needs.
It's a classic example of jumping to conclusions before really understanding the other person's perspective.
It is. Empathic listening isn't about agreeing with the other person or even liking what they have to say. It's about putting aside our own judgments and agendas to see the world through their eyes.
It's about creating a safe space for open and honest communication.
Exactly. And this requires more than just hearing the words. It involves paying attention to body language, tone of voice, and those underlying emotions.
So it's listening with our hearts as well as our minds.
Yes. Covey suggests practicing reflective listening, paraphrasing and summarizing what the other person is saying to make sure we're on the same page.
That not only clarifies the message, but also demonstrates empathy and respect.
It does. He also emphasizes asking clarifying questions, seeking to understand the deeper meaning behind the words.
Habit 5, seek first to understand, then to be understood, is a powerful principle for building trust and connection in any relationship. It's about recognizing that communication is a two-way street, not just about getting our point across, but about truly connecting with the other person.
Now let's move on to Habit 6, Synergize, which builds upon the foundations of win-win and empathetic listening.
I'm excited to explore this one. I've always been fascinated by the idea of synergy, how we can achieve so much more together than we ever could alone.
It's a powerful principle. Covey defines synergy as achieving outcomes that are greater than the sum of the parts. It's about creating something new and better through collaboration.
And this requires valuing and leveraging differences, right?
Absolutely. Instead of seeing differing perspectives as obstacles, we see them as opportunities for creative problem solving. Covey uses a great example of a couple planning a vacation. The husband wants to go fishing in a remote location while the wife wants to visit her mother in a bustling city. Classic dilemma, right?
Sounds familiar. What do? Flip a coin.
They resist the urge to compromise or argue, and instead explore a third alternative.
I love that idea. So it's not about finding a middle ground. It's about creating a win-win-win scenario.
Exactly. Through open communication and brainstorming, they find a solution that meets both their needs. They discover a scenic camping spot near the city, allowing the husband to enjoy nature while still being close to his mother-in-law. They even plan recreational activities with the extended family, creating a win-win-win for everyone involved.
That's a perfect example of synergy in action. It's about finding that creative solution that transcends the initial conflict.
It is, and it requires trust and a willingness to be open to new possibilities. Covey emphasizes that synergy often emerges when we let go of our need to be right and focus on finding the best solution for everyone involved.
So it's about letting go of our egos and embracing the collective wisdom of the group.
Right. He also highlights that synergy isn't limited to interpersonal interactions. It can also occur within our own minds, as we integrate our analytical and creative capabilities.
It's about tapping into the full potential of our own minds as well as the collective wisdom of a group.
Habit 6, Synergize, is truly a powerful principle for achieving extraordinary results. It's about moving beyond compromise and competition to create something truly innovative and beneficial for everyone involved.
We've now explored the first 6 habits, which provide a powerful framework for personal and interpersonal effectiveness. Let's move on to the final habit. Habit 7, sharpen the saw. Welcome back to our deep dive into the 7 habits of highly effective people. We've covered a lot of ground from paradigms and proactivity to synergy, and now habit 7, sharpen the saw.
Habit 7 is all about renewal, taking care of our most valuable asset, ourselves. It's about consistently investing in our physical, spiritual, mental, and social-emotional well-being.
It's like that saying, you can't pour from an empty cup. We can't effectively live out the other 6 habits if we're running on fumes. We need to replenish our energy and resources.
Exactly. Covey describes this as a quadrant 2 activity, important but not urgent.
It's so easy to put self-care on the back burner when we're caught up in the daily grind.
But neglecting renewal ultimately leads to burnout, decreased effectiveness, and strained relationships. It's like trying to run a marathon without ever stopping to fuel or hydrate.
So habit 7 is about prioritizing our well-being, making it non-negotiable.
Covey breaks down renewal into 4 dimensions. Let's start with the physical. Sharpening the saw in this area means taking care of our physical health through exercise, nutrition, sleep, and stress management.
It's about treating our bodies with respect, giving them the fuel and rest they need to function optimally.
And this not only improves our physical health, but also enhances our mental clarity, emotional resilience, and overall well-being. It's all interconnected.
Okay, so that's the physical dimension. What about the spiritual dimension? How do we sharpen the saw in this area?
It's about connecting with our core values, finding sources of inspiration and meaning in life. This might involve spending time in nature, meditating, practicing gratitude, engaging in creative pursuits, or connecting with our spiritual beliefs. It's about nourishing our souls.
I love that. It's about finding those activities that help us feel aligned with our deeper selves. And what about the mental dimension?
Sharpening the saw mentally is about engaging in activities that challenge our minds and expand our knowledge and skills. Reading, taking courses, learning a new language, having stimulating conversations, or exploring new ideas, these all fall under this category.
It's about being a lifelong learner, staying curious and keeping our minds engaged.
Exactly. And finally, the social-emotional dimension. This involves investing time and energy in building and nurturing healthy relationships.
This could include spending quality time with loved ones, practicing empathy and active listening, expressing appreciation, and resolving conflicts constructively. It's about building a strong support system.
Covey emphasizes that renewal in all four dimensions is essential for a balanced and fulfilling life.
And neglecting any one area can have a ripple effect, right? If we're not taking care of our physical health, for example, it can impact our mental clarity and our relationships.
It's all interconnected. He encourages us to create a personalized renewal plan, identifying specific activities that nourish us in each of the four dimensions.
It's about making a conscious effort to invest in ourselves. And it doesn't have to be huge chunks of time. Even a few minutes each day can make a difference.
Covey also highlights the role of our conscience in this process. He suggests that our conscience is like a compass guiding us toward our true north.
But just like any compass, it needs to be calibrated and maintained.
Right. This involves feeding our minds with inspiring content, engaging in ethical decision-making, and living in alignment with our values.
If we consistently ignore our conscience, it's like neglecting a muscle. It weakens over time.
Exactly. So think about it. What does sharpening the saw look like in your life? Are you making time for renewal in all four dimensions? What's one small step you can take today to invest in yourself?
It's a powerful question for all of us to consider. Small, consistent steps can create a ripple effect leading to significant positive change over time. And that brings us to the end of our deep dive into Stephen Covey's The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. We've explored his framework for personal and interpersonal effectiveness, covering everything from paradigms and proactivity to synergy and self-renewal.
It's amazing how these habits build upon each other, creating an upward spiral of growth.
We start by taking ownership of our choices and defining our direction. Then we prioritize what matters most, creating a life aligned with our values. As we cultivate these habits of personal leadership, we lay the foundation for strong, mutually beneficial relationships.
The habits of public victory. Think win-win. Seek first to understand, then to be understood, and synergize. Provide a roadmap for effective collaboration and creative problem solving.
And finally, habit 7, sharpen the saw, reminds us to consistently invest in our own well-being, to sustain our effectiveness in all areas of life.
Covey emphasizes that lasting change comes from the inside out. It's about transforming ourselves before we try to transform our circumstances or relationships.
He challenges us to become principle-centered, guided by fairness, integrity, honesty, and human dignity.
This requires a shift in mindset from scarcity to abundance, from reactive to proactive, from self-focus to a focus on service and contribution.
Covey's work reminds us that effectiveness is not about quick fixes or techniques. It's a way of being in the world.
It's about aligning our actions with our values and striving to live a life of integrity, purpose, and meaning.
As we wrap up, I'm curious, what's one final takeaway, one provocative thought you'd like to leave our listener with?
Covey talks about the upward spiral of growth that comes from continuous self-renewal. What area of your life feels most ready for that kind of upward movement? What small deposit could you make in your emotional bank account today to foster a more win-win relationship?
That's a powerful question to reflect on. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. We hope you found it insightful and empowering. Keep learning, keep growing, and keep diving deep.